Welcome to Lessons from Leaders here on Cuppa TV. I'm Yasmin London, your host for this series. We've partnered with Nespresso Professional to make sure that you hear the conversations that matter, because we all know that sometimes the greatest ideas happen over a simple cup of coffee. Today we're talking all about the great disconnect, how businesses can build confidence and connection in the digital age. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in and enjoy our chat on the great disconnect. My first question is to you, Milo. At the moment, people aged between 16 and 64 are spending around 6 hours and 38 minutes per day on screens, nearly 40% of our waking hours. Gen Z are around 9 hours a day. We each receive, as workers, around 117 emails a day. Hands up if that's you. That's about what you think you probably get. Right, lots. So my question to you, Milo, big question. In a world of rapid change and constant connection, what is the number one behavioural challenge that leaders are facing right now? And what can we do about it?
There's so many competing number one answers to that. And I was thinking about that when I was diligently brushing my teeth this morning. Change itself, I need to address that as a framework in the mind before we do anything else that sits around it. So neurologically, we are predisposed to be the most change-ready species on the planet. In fact, since I sat here and you sat there, we have regenerated a number of things within our brain and bodies. But psychologically, we're not that great at change because the predisposition of the brain itself is 73% of our thoughts all day, every day are quite negative. And that is rapidly growing, which is reflected in an engagement piece. So psychologically, we're not afraid of change at all. We're afraid of the loss that change represents. And if you think about that just for a moment, every time change is announced to you, around you, or for you, your brain goes straight to what it is that you are about to lose, even if that change is amazing. And I remember becoming a mother in my 40s because I decided to marry a man 10 years younger than me. Thank you, ladies, it's an achievement. 10 years younger than me. And we had a baby. I remember sitting there the night before the baby was scheduled, and I said to him, okay, here's all the things that we're going to lose, all the things are going to change. And I set a rule with him. I said, you can never buy the child a present unless you buy me one. And even though I was about to have a baby tomorrow and I was well and truly done with this, I was starting to feel the loss of my relationship one-on-one with this man. So it doesn't matter what that change is, it's the loss that we must reconcile. And the biggest risk to that is organisations that fail to recognise that reality.
What's it costing us then if those organisations can't recognise it, or if they stick their heads in the sand? What is the outcome at the moment?
We have a lack of engagement, quite frankly. We don't fit into any of that. And I have seen time and time again, and I'm sorry, I'm not referencing anyone in particular, but organisations all of a sudden say change is coming. For about 5 minutes they say that. They announce the change at 2 o'clock on Thursday, and by 5 o'clock on Friday you're supposed to be on the bus. And if you're a disruptor to said bus, then you must be removed within the next 60 days, and you're now on the chopping block. The cost is true engagement, and the lost conversation is not 16 days worth. It is a 10-minute reconciliation conversation of what is it that I'm about to lose? How do we feel about this from a loss perspective? Because we know that's where the brain and the body goes. And once we've had that conversation, the engagement piece actually exponentially moves forward. But without it, you can actually drag the feet of an organisation for about 18 months.
I think one of the things that you do so well is you really break down the data and the strategies into such simple and easy to implement, ideas. I mean, a simple conversation, 10 minutes, where you're acknowledging somebody's concerns and fears is such a simple strategy. Yes, we're all time poor sometimes, but really, really good step to take. Cookie, what are you seeing in terms of patterns across workplaces and society today? Are we really more productive when it comes to this sort of disconnection and the hybrid sort of environments that we're in and the reasons that we're trying to implement this new normal? Is it actually working? What are you seeing happen?
Well, I just want to take a look first around society and how we're all going. Does everyone know love languages? Yeah, well, now we've all got connection languages. You don't call me, leave a message, chat to me on Instagram, Slack channels, there's so many different languages that we speak with now that it's making it very hard for people to be able to understand and be able to communicate more effectively. So You know, to answer your question, it's like it's you know, the hybrid world that we're in, the ability to be able to, you know, see people every day that we care about as well. You know, productivity, it doesn't come unless you're connected as humans, and we're missing that fundamental thing from what we're seeing at Cuppa.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess this is a question for both of you. How do we create that connection? How do we balance productivity, what all workplaces really want, but really have that connection and understanding of each other as well? I love the idea of communication love languages and workplace love languages. I've always thought that we should have our I think they're called life profiles, or your sort of behavioural profile in your email signature, so that we can all start to sort of understand how we each communicate and what we're actually going to get from that. So how do we balance the productivity and that connection so that we're optimising both?
For me, from a psychological construct, we have to acknowledge that there are three ways that we're going to do any of that. The first one is aware of the opportunity or the problem, however it is needs to be framed, accept that this is the opportunity or the problem, and the third way of that is changing. Now, the awareness piece is, and this is a piece that I'm deeply passionate about, there are 5 generations in the workforce right now. So we do have to really understand the difference between that. What Cookie's talking about, the Slack and the communication language, the younger generation, they don't want to have the conversation. In fact, if they ring a mobile phone number and they don't get the voicemail message, they're going to have a visceral reaction to that. Yep. They want the voicemail message. So we have to understand as leaders and as organisations that there's no one size fits all. And that one size that fits all is not a boomer size or an X size or anything like that. So what are the differences of the workforce, and how does each and every individual see what engagement might be? And some people think that engagement is to be completely analytical and bamboozle everybody with normal data, normal stats and normal information. Some people think that communication is about being practical and oversharing and asking a million questions. Some people think it's just about having a vision and engaging people with pure inspiration. And some people want to hold hands quite often and have that sense of community. All 4 of those equal engagement, not one. And we're going to dominate with what it is that we're comfortable in, being analytical, practical, relational, or visionary. But we're failing to forget that all 4 need to be addressed across the workforce in any comms messaging.
I just want to add to that as well. I think it's interesting that you say that, Milo, because are you also saying that we need to change our approach as leaders to be able to suit every demographic that is coming through?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are fearful of what it is that we do not understand. And what I'm seeing a lot in the stepping back, and we're not trying to get people back to the office, we're trying to get people back to people. Yeah. That's that next step. So what I'm seeing in these particular places is the younger generation, I'm talking about under 25-year-old individuals, do not feel safe or acknowledged in the workforce because it's a command and control, do as I say. Now we are seeing leaders shift towards that, but there's a discomfort in shifting towards that. Are the older generation knowing how to communicate to the younger generation? No. So when they don't know how to do that, what are they doing? Nothing. They're doing it absolutely their way. The younger generation grew up, and I want to take you back for a minute. Why do we lack resilience, flexibility, and optimism in the younger generation? Because in 2001, the World Towers happened, and it changed the world forever. And it literally changed the world, the way that we parent. So every parent that let their kid, or were likely to let their kid, ride the bike till the sun comes up, pulled that kid in that house and they held them here. Now we need a little bit of that in leadership right now for those generations, because that's what they grew up with, not participation prizes. But how do we nurture whilst making them feel independent and empowered, but they are going to need to know that there is a partnership, not an expectation or an entitlement.
Which is, you know, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot right now is that, you know, organisations really need to think about what their rituals are when it comes to connection. It doesn't just happen anymore. You can't just expect people to come to the workplace and, you know, engage with each other and talk to each other, because we've lost that conversational muscle to be able to do that. So we need to think about these ritual moments that we can create inside organisations to bring back connection and bring people together on the journey. And leaders need to lean in on that, because if they don't, the employees don't come on board.
They really do. I think in the end, it's about really focusing on how do we draw people in rather than it being that command and control. These are my expectations. You will do this, you will do that. And I think we need to be far more creative about the ways that we do that. It's not the free lunch. Like, nobody cares about a free lunch, to be completely honest. How am I feeling connected to my workplace? Who am I going to see there? What are we going to do? How am I going to have a great day full of meaning in terms of the work that I'm producing? So we have to be creative about it. Now, Milo, you mentioned command and control, so I want to talk about psychological safety. That's a really big corporate buzzword at the moment. Everybody wants to make sure that we have psychologically and psychosocially safe workplaces. So, what does that actually look like in action? And also, really importantly, what erodes it? What are we doing wrong?
So we are talking about psychological safety at the moment, and one of my contracts at the moment, I'm an independent, and one of my contracts is with Qantas, and they're doing a great job in understanding, in the wake of Alan Joyce, and I'm not talking about Alan Joyce in any disrespectful manner. Alan Joyce was probably the only person on the planet that kept that airline in the sky in COVID, right? He was exceptional at what it is that he did, but there's a legacy, as any CEO leadership is. And that is such a deep command and control that you've now got a workforce that don't know how to make decisions, right? There's learned helplessness all the way across, and they're looking for answers and validation. What I've noticed in that organisation, it goes beyond psychological safety. So psychological safety is permission to exist. But there's something more than that, and that's a sense of belonging. So to teach belonging is psychological safety, I have permission to exist. Belonging means I have permission to speak. And that is the difference of that. So for me, it's understanding and what's eroding in these particular things is psychological safety from a neuroscience perspective. If I don't feel safe in an organisation, firstly, I'm not going to report mistakes. Secondly, I'm not going to be authentic in any particular way because I don't feel safe to do so. Brené Brown said it best, that the absolute opposite of a safety or belonging is fitting in. And are we leaders that are expecting people to fit in, or are we leaders that are focused on having them have a sense of belonging, and that is an individual nature? And what I'm noticing is that we're ramping up the vision, purpose, strategy. We've got purpose statements and laminates and hanging off the lift well doors. All of that stuff is great. But we also need to say, how does any of that matter to you? We're not a cult, right? We're not sitting and saying, these are the 4 behaviours that we only accept. I accept the behaviours if I've found a personal embedment to them, that I feel like I personally belong to them. And therefore I can add to them, not these are our purpose statements and behaviours and here we are, everybody needs to be that, and 20% of your bonus structure sits around it. So we're just failing to connect people as individuals to individual strategy, and that's great leadership.
Yeah. Cookie, what do you think?
I'll go back to when I first launched Cuppa. We signed on clients to come on board, watch the virtual streams during COVID. And I remember the CEO by the name of Jim, and I always reference Jim because I think Jim led by example in everything that he did. Now, Jim worked for an entertainment-based company, MD, had about 100 odd staff. Jim would lean into every conversation that we did on Cuppa and be the first person virtually to say hello in the chat room. He knew that his knowledge set was not capped. He knew that he had to go on a learning experience to learn about all the different topic areas, First Nations wisdom, transgender, everything. He leant in and he led by example. He carried those conversations forward. That I always reference Jim because I think Jim just epitomises what I believe a leader needs to be now. They need to be able to lean in. They don't just sign off on initiatives and think it's going to work. You've got to be part of the process. It's an even playing field when it comes to all of that. It's a team environment, sideways, down, every way. So my recommendation is be like Jim.
I love that. I mean, what you're saying is really also about being very visible and showcasing those skills and what it looks like to be a leader. These are things that we also need to take the time to teach in our organisations, right? So what might that look like, Milo, in terms of teachable skills?
I like the gym analogy because I also say that to foster belonging is, as a leader, we have to be the first to go first.
Yeah.
And we have to lean into those particular uncomfortable domains. So when we get beyond the age of 12 and particularly beyond the age of 40, we don't lean in anymore because discomfort equals a lack of knowledge. And we're not afraid of learning, we're afraid to show that there's something that we may not know. So embracing curiosity and saying I'm about to learn something here rather than rely on my worn paths of logic are going to be critically important to understand that. I also want to remind you from a neuroscience perspective, belonging is not just a fluffy thing that sounds nice, it's actually how we're hardwired as a species. So social rejection in the hardwired DNA of the early caveman and cavewoman meant that you died. It is absolutely, we're not supposed to be sitting alone. We never lived if we ever did that. So social rejection inside of an organisation lights up the same brain regions as if I lit your arm on fire. It's physical pain. So isolating people, and I've seen lots of leaders have a circle of trust, right? It's great if you're in that circle of trust. It sucks if you're not in that circle of trust. And if you're not in that circle of trust, do you ever have a possibility to get in the circle of trust? And those people that have a circle of trust, do you know how you get in it? You either become exactly like the leader or you throw somebody else under the bus for your position. That doesn't equal creativity, doesn't equal all of the things that happen when the brain is feeling safe. So we need to acknowledge the role that we are playing as leaders and as organizations. How are we rewarding? How are we noticing? And how are we showing up? And are your behaviors serving you in this organization? Fantastic. But would you survive if you weren't there? There's so many leaders think and find themselves on the blind side of a downsize or a restructure that become so institutionalized within their own behaviors that those behaviors no longer represent the real world outside of that. What will represent the real world is being somebody of authenticity, of vulnerability, and a willingness to go first.
Boom, mic drop on that one.
Yeah,
I love it. I do love the idea though. I mean, I'm a big believer in first movers, and in the end, these are the people who actively shape the environments that the world needs to meet its full potential.
Well, I was just going to say, Yaz, like I did a post on LinkedIn, which is starting to get some traction. People are resharing it, but I just wrote, hello, is anybody there? We've just, it's so easy to just ghost now. It's so easy not to connect. We say we're going to get back to people, we don't answer a phone call, and we just let it go. What you're just saying there is a personal dagger to the, not being acknowledged.
Yeah.
And it's the simple things. It's like, oh, I'm busy right now, but I can call you back. Like, that's great. Okay, I've got a result in my head. I know I can move on. And it's just become too easy to be.
Yeah. And it's such a simple strategy, really, because as you say, Milo, we struggle with the unknown and we make up sort of stories in our own mind about what that person's doing or saying and that they're actively ignoring us when actually maybe they are just busy, but a simple message, got your message, I'll get back to you, been a bit of a busy day. Just acknowledgement is sometimes all we need, isn't it?
100%. I referenced before that our brains are mostly negative, and not because we're trying to be the handbrakes to happiness in any situation. We're neurologically wired for risk and uncertainty. So we have a heightened sense of that. So 73% of the baseline of our brain sits there and thinks something's wrong. Or we sit in a remit where we are forced and charged to solve problems every day, all day. And when there are no problems to solve, we go looking for them. And if there's none there, we're going to create them, right? We blow ourselves up. So the reality of that situation is that I'm always looking to see where I am either disadvantaged or potentially a victim. That is the baseline. Now, very few people have this DNA called DKK, and the DNA is the explorer gene. They don't care. They're like walking in going, everything's amazing and everything's possible. And they have that flexibility, optimism, and resilience stuff. That's only 20% of the population. 80% of the population are looking to be disadvantaged, looking to be rejected, looking to be socially outed, looking to be fearful, looking to be fitting in. If that's the data and that's the stats and that's the relationship between brain and body and the way that we're seeing the world, should we not be doing more? And my 14-year-old niece, the ghosting, she's so cute. She's such a cutie pie. And she's got a couple of, interested suitors, as I put it. She'd be like, don't use those words, but I'm just being polite. She's ghosting them. So she'll go on a date and she'll be like, don't like you, and ghost them. And we're having big conversations because your generation wants to fit in, yet you're the biggest ghosters there ever were. And because it's becoming easy. And why is it? They simply don't know how to have a conversation. They don't know how to have a conversation, and we don't either. We're all kind of getting in that same particular way of, I don't know how to do that. I need to be authentic, I need to be vulnerable, but that's really sticky and uncomfortable, so I'm just not going to do it, I'm going to ghost. And it feeds into our negative, uncertain kind of ways of being.
How do we address that? Because I think that's happening, you know, in every home, right? If we have kids that can't have those difficult conversations, and we have more and more parents who also are withdrawing or moving away from those conversations and not teaching the skills and role modelling what it looks like to be brave and to do the right thing and acknowledge the human, where do we go? Like, what should we be doing?
I have 2 kids, they're 9 and 10. We have conversations every single evening, whether I'm home or not. And what parents usually do, and this is a great credit to us all, is we have a highlights, lowlights conversation. What is it that was the greatest part of your day? And what is it that was the lowest part of your day? And we naturally have that. And even if you don't, even once a week makes a big difference around communication, your inward to your outward. What I also have a conversation with my children is, what was awkward today? So I want them to acknowledge that something felt a little icky. And I ask them where the awkward sits on their body. So it is in the head, in the chest, or the stomach, whatever it might be. And I also say, did you have an awkward conversation today? Now with kids, an awkward conversation is cracking into a social structure and saying, can I play with you? That's mostly the time of that. So if you ask that to an adult, and I'll say that to my husband, what was the best part of your day, worst part of your day, what was the awkward part of the day, and is there anything that you avoided? We're asking those questions to create an articulation muscle in our brains to have that conversation. Because I don't want my kids afraid of awkward conversations at all. I'm not afraid of having an awkward conversation. In fact, I'm probably the catalyst for awkward conversations. But I want them to know that not everything needs to be peaches and cream, and not everything needs to be from hell. That there's somewhere in the middle that I didn't want to have that conversation, but I did, and this is what I learned from it.
I think that's so important, because it also teaches them empathy and to be the receiver of that person brave enough to say, can I play with you? And I think that's
absolutely.
so important.
My 9-year-old's a figure skater, right? You need to be a certain kind of psychopath to be a figure skater. That's it. Now she's sitting there in a figure skating competition. You get about 2 minutes to warm up on the ice. When she was 6 years old, she turned to the girls behind her and she said to them all, no point in warming up, you're not going to win this, it's mine. Now, that's an awkward conversation for me. She put that as a highlight conversation. I'm like, we're going to have a conversation about all of that, right? I love your ownership. I love the lioness mindset. But then we have a further discussion around that, which is impact. So that conversation felt that it was really powerful for you to have. And I love the lioness factor of that. But can we also have a look at the impact that might have had? And she says to me, well, it psyched them out. That was the impact that it had. And I was the one on the gold medal standard. I'm like, yes, it was. But is that how you want to be seen as a person when our highest value is kindness? So that it's beyond the awkward. It's also, let's have impact conversations and let's understand that. And when I foster conversations, I done leadership training recently. I fostered a conversation where I asked people to say, what you do is not who you are. So let me tell you, give everybody a statement about who you are. And a gentleman mentioned that his son is going through cancer treatment. His son is only 4. Now, the room full of people, 15 people, and I said to them all, I want you to check the impact that that had on you, but I also want you to push it aside because it's not about you, it's about him. So if we were in presence for him and we were trying to understand and ask more questions about what that is like for him, but we can't do that because we're all sitting there going, what would that be like for me? What if it was my child? And we're all forgetting to go to the impact and be present with the person, not inject ourselves in everyone else's scenarios.
And I think it's about also knowing that not everything is about us. We are built to care about what we think and feel, but that is such a critical the point to take away. I want to just get back into workplaces, because what I think what we're talking about here is building culture, right? A different type of culture. How can businesses walk the talk with this, rather than sort of say they've got the mission statements up there that they're trying their best with different strategies? What are some other ways that you've observed businesses doing this well? How can they do this properly?
Yeah, I think in the current landscape that we're in, we've got so many people out there in our workplaces that are either agitators or resistors for change at the moment. And then you've got people sitting on the fence, the observers, what I call, they They sit there and they wait for movements to occur. Our challenge is we're not, I like what you said about the explorer mindset, we're not moving people from the observer to the explorer mindset, and that incorporates a big cultural shift that we need to do, right? And who is the right innovators inside the organisations that can galvanise everyone together to make those shifts? What I see in workplaces, it's all tokenistic, a lot of it. It's tick box, are you okay days, International Women's Day, all that type of stuff. They're trying because that's all they think is the solution, is to have these in-front conversations. So right now, we get influx of speaking gigs and all that type of stuff for Are You OK days. I'm going in there, well, what's the mental health strategy? Like, what's the plan around this?
It's more than a day, yeah.
Yeah, and is your leadership team on board? Because nothing changes unless the leadership team is galvanised behind it as well, where the language is consistent, where there's no silos being built, where the resistors are actually the leaders in it, because nothing moves forward without the leadership team being aligned.
And I think what you're saying as well, what I'm hearing is, we're talking a lot about leaders, and in many ways we're sort of referring to the hierarchy, but actually leaders are at every level of the organisation, and we might call them, organisational influencers might be a better word, but we've got to be able to identify those people who can be the champions that others will follow, who have that X factor or that skill set or whatever it might be, to really sort of bring them in and know that everybody can play their role in terms of addressing this in a different way. Would you agree with that?
Well, what Milo said at the start as well, like there's been so much change that has been a part of our evolution in the last sort of 5 years, and there's change afoot as well with AI and everything else coming. So we're in this constant battle of, wondering where our safety net is to be able to move forward. So yeah, I think it is exactly what you said there, Yaz.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to be a bit more creative with the ways that we're doing things. I've noticed even with events, you mentioned Are You OK and, International Women's Day, and they do just feel tokenistic these days. Like they're kind of a bit done to death. They're a simple strategy, I guess. We've got to figure out how we're embedding this and really believing it in terms of a cultural strategy. Now, Milo, from your work with high performers, and you work a lot with teams in crisis, and I want to acknowledge that what we're talking about here is great in theory for many, and there might be many of you in the room going, yeah, but we're so busy, like how are we meant to do this when we've got all of this happening? So what have you learnt about how something like safety unlocks authenticity and resilience within organisations when they're going through tough times?
I think psychological safety, obviously, as I said, is a key word, and Amy Edmondson was the one that coined it in the first place, where she was doing an assignment in a hospital and realising that psychologically safe teams were making a lot of errors, and psychologically unsafe teams were making fewer errors. And when she drilled down into that, she realised that the errors were reported because you felt safe to do so. So what's it doing to teams at the moment is there's a lot of covert hiding going on about whether we feel comfortable in doing something, whether we're uncomfortable doing something. And I always look at it from a brain's perspective. So if we don't have psychological safety, it actually creates almost a stop in our prefrontal cortex, where our prefrontal cortex goes into a survive state instead of a thrive state. And what do businesses need in order to grow? Thrive states. So we're just existing. We're just trying to catch up. We're just doing our very best. We're not actually creating anything new. We're not being authentic in the way we communicate. It also holds us back. So it creates this physical pain where we're okay to call in sick. We're not connected in any way. If we call in sick, we're going to have a great day out, but we're not thinking about the 6 people who's just taken the slack of what it is that I'm there to do. We're no longer connected to each other. And one of the biggest issues around the safety and belonging piece is we are lacking presence, true presence. Even with our children, if we're not present at work, when we go home and we're sitting on the floor playing Lego, we're wondering 6 other things in our mind, and our little one's trying to get our attention, and our heads are buried in the phone. And I remember sitting there at a kids' soccer game, 7-year-old soccer game, and all the kids are playing soccer, and the row of parents in their camp chairs. And I would say there's 18 parents in this particular 2-team dynamic, and 2 of them were not on their phone. So we're not being present. Now, how accepted, engaged, belonged Does anyone feel when somebody is not even looking at you when you're trying to get a response from them? So I think that we've really got to understand that being present is all part of that engagement. Being present to people is also going to make people feel included and safe and not needing to fit in.
And that's also about unpacking how to be present, because I guess the one thing I think of when people are constantly on their phones in those situations is they're trying to regulate themselves, they're trying to get stuff done, obviously, but it's that boredom that we can't sit with anymore because, you know, we're not used to that. We want to be productive, we want to maximise the time, and we can't just be.
No, and in 2008, the human attention span was 15 seconds. It's now 8 seconds. And the want to have is 7 minutes of time. So I want something to having it, whether it's in the inbox or a shopping cart, it's 7 minutes. When I grew up, the want to have was a 12-month to an 18-month dynamic, no matter how much money you had in that bank. So we're not really working hard for anything anymore. We're in the sky. It's somewhere out here and everything's possible. But my husband's a realist. He works in insurance. And every day he washes his body in the same sequence. He gets up at the same time. He's got a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday outfit. And I sit there and think, Dal, you're 10 years younger than me, but you're actually going to end up in a wheelchair before me because your brain is just absolutely fragmented into this habitual state. And he said to me, do you know why I do that? And I said, why? And he goes, because I'm married to you. He said, everything's a variable when you're married to somebody like you, so I've got to control something. My point being is that sometimes we're not present because we really need to be in control. And when we give up control and we lean into a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of unknowing, then we're okay to be present.
I love that. I love that he has 5 days a week of the outfits already laid out. It's very Steve Jobs.
He has 7 days a week of pajamas, and on Saturdays he doesn't wear them. And I'm like, I don't know what you think you're going to get on a Saturday, but bring them out, mate.
Yeah, he puts his birthday suit on. Cookie, at Cuppa, you focus a lot on storytelling, and we've discussed visibility and using that as a mechanism to show people how to do the difficult things that maybe they don't know how to do, how to lead by example. Can you tell me more about the power of storytelling in terms of the role of influencing businesses in this sort of a way to try and create change and connection?
Our story is the only thing that we can ever hold on to. Our story is unique. Our organisational story is unique. Our individual stories are unique. So when we get to the depths of wanting to speak to someone or understanding what our organisational purpose is, we've got to go deep on the story because that's what brings people along. You know, I've interviewed now, I don't know, it's got to be close to 600 different people, and each one of them have an individual story of beautiful change and purpose. And when we sit there with a willingness to understand and not reply, when we sit there to ask the questions and listen. You know, Oscar Trimboli said to me, he goes, like, we speak at, we speak at 150 words a minute, but think at 900 words a minute. So most of the people that you're talking to, the initial things that they're trying to get out isn't exactly what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
So you need to let them be able to expand. And that's why when I go into conversations now, and I had a heartfelt conversation with Ella the other week at an event, and we just went straight into our story, and it was beautiful. It was a great connection because of that moment. Not how are you or what do you do for a job or anything like that. When you get to the core of a person, and you can get that in an organisation as well. You can get to the beauty of the story of the organisation, like Nespresso Professional and everything that they do. From a sustainability lens, they've got a beautiful story and narrative that every employee is engaged with from day one. They know the remit of the organisation. I think it's critical.
I love storytelling, and I think it's, you know, we've got to sort of move to connecting with each other through hearts and minds. You know, I talk about that a lot in the work that I do. And when it comes to storytelling, I think we've got to really legitimise that. We know that, I think you probably know this, Milo, that when we share and when we learn through storytelling, we're 22 times more likely to remember the lessons. So it's not just a nice to have. It's not a fluffy kind of scenario that you sort of get together and even at events like this, come and have a great time networking with different people. We're actually learning in the way that we're meant to learn as human beings. And it's really enjoyable, and that's a great part of it as well.
I was just going to say, Yaz, before I started Cuppa, it took me 39 years to sit down with a First Nations person to hear their story. It took me 39 years to sit down with someone that was transgender to hear their story, someone that was a quadriplegic. I didn't surround myself with people that were like me.
And what changed for you after those conversations?
Well, I realised that I held on to many unconscious biases. You know how I said the agitator and resistor mindset? I was probably an agitator around, I was an agitator around transgender conversations. I was an agitator around First Nations conversations. Jokes I used to make. Now, I'm not proud of that now, but when I sat down and had a conversation with someone that was completely different from me, with a willingness to understand their story, my perceptions and views completely shifted.
Yeah.
I'm now in the explorer mindset where I want to lean in and learn more. And we can do that every single day. If we look at our surroundings and the people that we have in our world, they're going to look and feel exactly the same as you. Start stretching that boundary in the workplace. Talk to the janitor, understand their story. Talk to the leader. Just get involved, because you're learning around culture and learning around everything else just supersedes. You become a better leader. You become a better human.
Yeah.
That's how we shift society.
Yeah.
Is if we can all lean into those difficult conversations. And I love it. When I get nerves, it means I'm about to learn something new if I'm about to have a chat to someone. It's a beautiful place to be.
It really is. And I think, we fear the unknown, as you've mentioned a few times, Milo. If we can find it within ourselves to really diversify our thinking, we always do learn. And even if you are talking to the cleaner or the janitor, there's always patterns that I find you always start to put together in terms of similarities. And when we have similarities, we start to feel more connected to different people. We have exposure. It's really sort of sets us on a different path and a different trajectory to really understanding, I guess, belonging as a human race. And that's a nice segue to the next question, which is for you, Milo, around fitting in and belonging. When businesses are doing this really right, what does it look like? What does it feel like? How can they measure success, really importantly as well? How can we make sure we know we're on the right path?
I love what Cookie was saying firstly about the belonging, because it does feed into that answer. From a neuroscience perspective, the storytelling elements, it's not just a nice thing to do. There's a couple of psychological and neurological things that happen when we do this really well. Number one is every single one of you has your inner 5-year-old that sat in a tiny little circle where someone went, once upon a time. And that was the most magical sounds of a childhood, when somebody started something with once upon a time. So your inner 5-year-old loves to hear a story more than anything else. We also know that what happens within the brain is these mirror neurons are enlightened. So we become connected neurologically when stories are being told. Now, they don't need to be tragic stories like the gentleman with the 4-year-old. It can be a beautiful story, a funny story, or anything in the middle. If we didn't have that, comedians wouldn't work. It's not just about laughter, it's laughter through storytelling. So mirror coupling starts to happen. And mirror coupling looks a little bit like this. When you are with somebody that you love, for instance, and you're thinking, what are we going to have for dinner? And within 60 seconds, that person asks exactly the same question. It's not a coincidence, it's not magic, it's neural coupling. And every time we are all together as one, all of this oxytocin and dopamine and all of the good stuff happens within your body. It is equivalent. Storytelling is the equivalent of a hit of cocaine. And I know which one's legal, right? So all of those types of things, even as leaders, and I've met a leader recently who was running a conference. She's a CEO of an organization. There's no safety in it for many different reasons, which I won't go into. But she was running a conference. She was doing the opening keynote address. And I said, I really need you to show them that you're a human, because at the moment they're annihilating your process. So process and people, this is one of the ways that we make this thing a difference. We see things as a process and we see things as people. And when our processes clash, we discount people. And unless you sat at my dining table and met my children, you don't have a right to do that. If you've not asked me questions about my life or my differences or my choices, you don't have a right to do that. It's ignorance. So understand that sometimes our processes will clash. So step one in making this better, is it the process that you're frustrated with, or is it the people? Secondly, in mirror coupling, think about, all of you, I want you to think about somebody that annoys you. And I don't mean because they're a criminal or moralistically bankrupt. I mean somebody that just has a trait that's annoying. Now, when you think about that person, what you actively are going to do is avoid them. The reality is you're avoiding yourself because they represent the very thing you are most capable of. Now, I'll give you an example. I struggle with people with big egos. People that stand there and they just think the world is here to come and get them, right? I struggle with that. Why? Because I have an enormous ego that I'm trying to keep humble and trying to keep my vulnerability on top of that. But at any day, if I'm in a meeting and somebody challenges my sensibility or my intelligence, I'm literally the fiercest person you'll ever meet. My inner Polynesian goes, rah. So I know that I'm most capable of demonstrating the very qualities that annoy me about others. And so are you. So as leaders, let's use a little bit of above the line psychology to understand that what it is that you're avoiding is the very things that you're capable of. The things that annoy you about some of your staff members are some of the things you're not servicing from above or you're not getting. So let's be honest about what it is that you're doing about that. And as I said, be the first to go first and show up. And also, I want you to understand impact. How you change some of this stuff is care about the impact that you're having on other people. And not at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're slightly questioning whether you should or shouldn't have said that. And then tomorrow you don't apologize for it because your 4-year-old wants to be defiant. Your inner 4-year-old. Be the person that you want to be and care about that every day. Because every single one of you, none of you own your jobs. None of you. You are custodians of them. And your job, you don't own your employees either. You are custodians of them too. So at the end of the day, your job is to create a job that's better than when you found it and create an entire workforce of people that are 10 times better than you. That's legacy. And we need to be open in order to do any of that.
I love that. Cookie, do you have anything to add? Because I guess what we're talking about here is high levels of self-awareness, if we're honest. So how do we develop that? And especially in our organisations, perhaps where we might judge people who are perhaps not very self-aware, we need to make sure that that's increasing too. What do you think, Cookie?
Oh, it just reminded me of a story when I first interviewed Joey Williams, an Indigenous man. And I was talking about reconciliation. And he goes, Cookie, don't even talk to me about that because we've got to build a relationship first. We've got nothing to reconcile. And to me, that was, that was an honesty statement that I needed to hear because I was talking in a way that, I wanted to help. But he goes, we've got to build a relationship first, and relationship takes time. So we can't think that everything's going to turn over overnight. We have to be there to build relationships, and relationships takes human connection, the ability to understand story, and the ability to be able to work through things together without the hierarchy there.
And not be transactional, I guess, because going to those questions, we're straight away like, what can we fix? How can we do this? How do I get from A to B?
Because that's what we're used to. We're so quick to dopamine hits now of instant gratification of getting things done. We've got so many tech platforms inside our organisations now. Yeah. Like everything is so quick because that's the way that we've accustomed everything that we do now. It's our own fault for doing this. That's why I think it's beautiful right now, and people are getting nervous about AI and how it's going to take over jobs. But I think at the same time, there's also a brilliant opportunity here to bring back human connection and relationships. Because if we can get AI to do the jobs that we need it to do, where else are we going to be spending that time? We need to be spending that time together.
We need brave leaders, though, who are prepared to let go of the past ways of doing things, though. I think AI, we were in this situation where, yes, it can make us so much more productive. It can get us away from the menial, repetitive tasks, but we've also got to implement those changes meaningfully in our organisation so that we're not sort of holding on to things. I can still remember back in the police force, this was, I left in 2019, so it was a very interesting organisation to be part of for 13 years. But they'd implement new systems, and just to be sure, we still had to complete the events and the reports in the old systems. So we were literally double dipping. And I remember arguing this and was told, Yasmin, you've just got to remember you're a cog in a big wheel. So many things that were, I guess, wrong with that conversation, but we have to be able to let go of the past and how we've done things previously and truly be focused on evolution and innovation and all of the benefits that can come with that. Okay, let's get into some really practical takeaways for the last couple of questions that we've got. So Milo, we've gone through a lot of different strategies. I love the data. I love the psychology behind what you talk about. But what are 3 things for everybody in this room? What are 3 things that they could do this week to start reconnecting with their people really meaningfully?
As I said, be the first to go first. Try new things, step out, encourage your curiosity, learn something new. It's going to be hard, but it's an absolute. And if you want to try this for a second, I'll tell you how hard it's going to be. Hold this for me, Cookie. Everybody do this for me. Everybody do this. Now swap it. Now, the psychological reaction that you're having to your inability to do that, it's entertaining for me to watch you all suck at that, but the psychological reality of doing anything that we're telling you to do is going to feel as difficult as that finger exercise. So you can either put your hands down and never do it again, or you can move to the next phase of psychology that says, I'm actually going to push through the difficulty because the reward is going to be great and I now know how to do something new. So which side of you do you want to be in that? Be the first to go first. Next one is create clear boundaries and expectations. Do not lead by chaos. So leading by chaos means that everybody's here, there and everywhere. No one is connected in any particular way. And those people that act the naughtiest and the loudest and scream the most are the ones that get noticed. But in the corner is a quiet genius. And you're not looking for that person because you're getting intrinsic value by being able to fix multiple problems, not create opportunities for anyone else. Have hard conversations. Have hard conversations. Conflict is okay. We're not afraid of giving feedback. We're conflict adverse and we're getting worse at that. So sometimes we need to have hard conversations, but the hardest conversations can be the kindest conversations, because if somebody is struggling, really struggling, and you're letting them struggle without having a hard conversation, and maybe the conversation is maybe this is not the job for you, whilst letting them go is a hard conversation, watching them fly once they've gone is a good one. So have that hard conversation and build belonging into decision making. So be really clear who's at the table. Why is it those that are in the workforce for 35 years that have the nominals against their name, why are they the only ones at the table? Why do we not have the disruptors, the energy, the youth, the people that communicate differently? Why do we not have those people at the table? So I think the world of hierarchy and earning your stripes, even in elite sports, is archaic. Who is at the table is the diversity of thinkers, not the most hierarchical that are now drinking their Kool-Aid and they don't know how to act any other way. That's my starting run.
I love that. I think that's so important. And going back to those difficult conversations to get those people in the room, I think it was Brene Brown, again, the Queen, that says that clear is kind. And I remember listening to that. It is. Clear is kind. People get lost in ambiguity. Yeah. So it is actually doing them a huge favour to make sure that, you know, they know what the rules and the lay of the land are. Cookie, same question to you, but I'm going to make it even harder. Mm-hmm. What's the one thing people in this room can do from today when they go back to their workplaces to create a more connected and confident culture?
It's one thing, know your story and find out someone else's story. To know your story, what I did was I timelined my whole life. All the good, the bad, the big, the ugly, the small moments, everything that's happened. And it was interesting going through that. I could really understand the narrative that came through. To hear someone else's story, just to ask the question, someone that you've never spoken to before. And don't forget, sorry, there is another one, acknowledgement.
I knew this was impossible.
Sorry, I know, yeah, but the acknowledgement piece. Who the last week has had a phone call come through to their phone and have let it go to voicemail and haven't returned that person's phone call back? A few people have raised their hands.
Well done for being the brave people to put your hand up too.
It happens so often and we don't acknowledge that phone call even existed. So they're the things, storytelling and acknowledgement.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I wish we could keep talking. I could, as I say, always talk to these two till the cows come home, but we do have to get you all off to work. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this incredible conversation, to be part of it, Milo and Cookie. I love talking to both of you. I learned so much. What an incredible conversation with Milo Wilkinson and Luke Cook today on the Great Disconnect. Some incredible takeaways and really, really helpful information. So we encourage you to take them away and share with others in your leadership team. And there's more where that came from. Don't forget to explore the other conversations in our Lessons from Leaders series, all brewed in partnership with Nespresso Professional. Until next time, I'm Yasmin London, your host. Take good care.